All right, hello everyone. I am Nathan Hulinsky with the University of Minnesota Extension, and this is a land rent webinar today focusing on Northwest Minnesota. So I'll kind of highlight Polk and Norman County, and this is for land rent information. Everybody who registered for this workshop should have gotten an email from me earlier today with a handout for the workshop. And in that handout, there is a bunch of the information that I'll be going through. If you have future questions, feel free to email me or send me a phone call. You can see my email is on the screen. It's on the handout as well. And yeah, um, here we go. So this is our quick agenda. We'll be going over some farmland rental rate trends. We have some crop budget, some Finbin data. We'll walk through land values. We have some worksheets and then a few things to wrap up. So the University of Minnesota Extension's website has pretty much all this information on it. So pretty much everything in the handout is on our website. So if you do have questions down the road, our website is pretty much the first place to look. You can see the red website, that managing a farm is the website. That blue link is the same website, just shortened so it's easy to type in z.umn.edu/LR25 as in land rent. So if you have future questions, great place to start. This is what the website looks like. If you click on the uh, farmland rental rate stuff and then you click on the cropland rental rates, it'll open up a table with these alphabetical list of counties with the last 3 years of land rental information. So again, we have a lot of this data very easy to find right on our website. There are two main resources that we have with land rental information. The first helpful resource, or the first data collection source we have, is the Center for Farm Financial Management, and they collect this data, and it's in the database called Finbin. I'll be talking about Finbin data all throughout the next hour of this workshop, but it's pretty good data. To be the Center for Farm Financial Management, which is part of the University of Minnesota, they collect this data from farms who are enrolled in the one-on-one farm business management system. It's all across the state of Minnesota, and farms who in that just have their data anonymously uploaded into this data set, and it's organized by county. So this is a breakdown of Northwest Minnesota land rental numbers. So you can see Polk County here is not broken down east and west. Once in a while, some of the data sets do break down Polk County east and west. Some of the USDA data is. For this particular reason, it is not. So I'll just highlight Polk County here. Polk County, we can see we have the data here. Back in 2001, we had $106 per acre average dry land crop rental rate data or price point, $106 per acre. Into 2022, it jumped up to 114, jumped up again into 2023, and the data set to 120. Sorry about this. My phone call is going off. I don't know how to stop it. Sorry about that. Can't talk right now. Sorry. All right, so $120 per acre in 2023. Into 2024, a slight decrease, down to 118. And if you look across the different counties in the region, some saw a decrease into 2024, some didn't. The statewide average did see a drop moving into 2023. The 2024 data, we have Polk County broken down between average, which is again simply the average, the median, which is the number in the middle. So if you go high to low, the median's the number in the middle. And then we have the 10th percentile, which is the bottom end of the spectrum, the bottom 10%. And then the 90th percentile is the upper 10%. So it's kind of the range, not quite high to low, but the lower end to the higher end. So in Polk County, that's from 65 to 173. So across the county, that's a pretty wide variation in land rental rates. The other good data set that we have is the USDA. So the USDA NAS, which is the National Agricultural Statistics Service, is just like the number crunching part of the USDA. They collect this data. They typically collect this through surveys sent out to farmers. So they send these surveys out annually, and then each individual county committees goes through the number and gets their nod of approval to it before it's published. You can see at Polk County, they had 132, the county average land rental rate in 2024. And then moving into 2025, they had a slight increase at 137 per acre in 25. So the number's similar to the Finbin database, but slightly different. And then that's not really anything right or wrong. It's just a different data set. If we look at, Becker County at the top of the table, we have 131 for the average in 2024, USDA number 135. They're typically very close to each other, which just highlights that the data is, they're both accurate, I think is what that would kind of highlight when they both are very similar numbers. So when I get questions throughout the year via email or phone call on land rental rates, I highlight both the Finbin data and the USDA data for each county for the last couple of years. And again, in the handout that everyone has, they have statewide data listed in the handout. And this is the changes in the last few years. So this is broken down regionally. So Northwest Minnesota, you can see from 2020 to 2024, over that 5-year period, we had a 19% increase. So pretty strong increases in land rental rates the last few years. You can see the state as a whole is about a 21% increase. So some strong increases. And then from 2023 into 2024, the overall trend was a decrease, right? So kind of that 1 to 2% was our overall average decreases from 23 into 2024. I anticipate moving into 2025 and 2026, that trend line to stay pretty steady of a very slight decrease, just with the way current commodity prices are. And I'll highlight that in a little bit. There's not a whole lot of data on this screen, but I have irrigated data and pasture data. So Polk County has a little bit of irrigation. You can see in 2024, the USDA said the irrigation data was 232 an acre. All the other counties didn't have much to share with us. On the right-hand side of the screen is our pasture rental data. I get a few pasture rental questions. When the USDA publishes this pasture rental number, it is a per acre basis. And a lot of times when farmers rent ground for livestock, it's on an animal basis. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy in the data between the animal units and the per acre. But we can help. I have other data on pasture rent if there are more specific questions. So that's the average rental rate trends we've been seeing the last few years. Next, I'll highlight our crop budgets. So I made these budgets. I use data from the Finbin database. If you don't like the budgets, unfortunately, that's my fault because I made them. But we can see here, these budgets are specific to Northwest Minnesota. So these are not statewide. These are specific to the northwest corner of the state. And we can see our average yield has been about 155 bushels the last about 5 years. So we do, that's our average yield. The average price has been $4.75 over the last 5 years. Last year, the average sale price was just over $4.10. My projection in the next year is $4 corn. If we look at some of the cash markets, that's kind of right where we're at. We have our list of expenses. So I'm not going to go through all these expenses line item by line item, but you can see how they do fluctuate. Some of the farmers' expenses have increased the last few years. The net income number that on the bottom of my budget is the average net income per acre that farmers have gotten. We can see the last 5 years, average net income was $97 per acre. So fairly strong income the last few years. If we go back historically, the average net income per acre is probably closer to $50 per acre. So the last few years, fairly strong income. I will also mention that 2021 and 2022 really increased our 5 year average window. 24 and into 2025, net income's not near as profitable. You can see in 2024, the average net income, parentheses, does mean negative. Farmers lost $10 per acre on corn ground in 2024. My projected budget into 2026 has a loss of $37 per acre moving into next year. So corn ground not looking profitable next year. And if we look at the top here, that's the cost of production breakdown. In 2020, the average cost of production, that's to grow 1 bushel of corn on the farm, $3.38. And you can see the big jump in expenses there in 2021, where the cost of production jumped over $1 to $4.54, jumped again into 2022, dropped a little bit into 23, a little bit more into 2024, but still about 4.25 to grow 1 bushel of corn. So just highlighting that. The next budget we have here is for soybeans. Same budget layout. You can see the cost of production at the top. In 2020, it was $7.95, and into 2021, it jumped a whopping $3 per bushel to $10.93. So just in that 1 year, farmers were expensing an extra $3 per bushel to grow soybeans. So a tremendous increase in expenses. You can see the average yield and the average price on the table here. I'll jump to the net income at the bottom. The 5 year average net income, just under $70 per acre. So not a horrible number for the last 5 years. You can see in 2024, that was actually, though, a $32 loss per acre. So 2024 was bad for growing soybeans. And my budget projection into 2026 is kind of identical at a loss of $36 per acre. So if you do have, for landowners on the call today, if you have farmers who are coming up to you and say, hey, I am struggling with my, income, I'm asking for a decrease in land rental rates. This is the reason why. Farmers' expected rates of return are negative moving into 2026. So just to kind of put that into perspective. Same budget for spring wheat. The 5 year average net income there, right at $45 per acre positive. Moving into next year, or for 2024, a loss of $36 per acre, very similar to soybeans. And then moving into 2026, though, the loss on spring wheat is pretty strong at over $100 per acre loss. So spring wheat is not looking very profitable into next year. And then one more budget we have here for sugar beets. Highlighting again what their profit and loss is looking like. Their income here, their average net income is actually a whopping $444 per acre over the last 5 years. So they've seen some very strong profit margins the last few years. I do think, again, 21, 22, 23 were really high income on the sugar beet side of things. You can see in 2024, according to the Finbin database, sugar beet farmers actually profited $700 per acre growing sugar beets. So tremendous profits the last few years on the sugar beet side of things. I know in 2025 that sugar beet net income was substantially less than 2024. You can see my projection into 2026 is more or less break even on sugar beets there. I have a $20 profit in there, but that's very easy to see that vanish with any fluctuation in expenses. But historically, sugar beets have been fairly profitable. The next slide I have here is highlighting the net income. This is Minnesota as a state, so the whole state of Minnesota, just um, net income on crop farms. So the red line is inflation adjusted dollars. The black bar is that actual nominal dollars for that calendar year. And we can see starting kind of in '07 through 2012, fairly high incomes on the farm, right? Especially 2012, looking back, inflation adjusted, we're talking some $350,000 of income. So tremendous income, especially in 2012 and a couple of years before. However, 2013 through 2020 was very low income on the farm. 2013 through 2019 were all below $50,000 of net income. So that's well below, like the US average family income threshold. So pretty minimal income for that 6, 7 year window. And then starting in late 2020, 2021, and 2022, high income, right? 2021 and 2022, above $200,000 of income on the crop farm. So high income. However, starting in 2023, those incomes vanish, right? 2023 income right around that $50,000 mark. And then unfortunately in 2024, incomes more or less vanished, where the average or the median net farm income on crop farms was $2,400 in 2024. So that's the lowest we have in our whole graphic going back 20 years. So 2024 was a very poor income year for crop farms in Minnesota. So again, if some of these crop farms that you're dealing with are asking for a decrease in land rent, this is the main driver behind that. They just haven't had the profits to sustain a profitable business the last year and a half. This is specific to Southwest Minnesota, but this is a breakdown between average price received in black, and the blue line is their average cost of production. And if we slap this on the previous screen, they highlight very well, again, that 2007 through 2012, higher incomes. And we can see that on this corn graph, when the red or the black bar is well above the blue bar, we have some, dollar per bushel incomes, right? In 2012, we had, almost $2 per bushel of income, really strong incomes. Again, 2014 through 2020, pretty much no income on the farm, right? We're selling at break even. We're breaking even. We're selling at our cost of production. 2021, 2022, again, some stronger incomes. And then in 2024 there, we can see again the incomes kind of vanished again the last year and a half. Same graphic here on soybeans. Again, we go back 10, 15 years ago, a profitable period. 2014 through 2020, not much profits. Not as clearly on the soybean graph as there were on the corn graph, but 21 and 2022, fairly high income again. But 23, 24, that vanished. This is the average price received by Minnesota farmers on corn per bushel the last 3 years. And it just happens to be that 2023, that top dark red line, was the highest income. We had 650 corn for the first half of the year, and then starting in kind of midsummer, it dropped off. We ended the year at $5 corn. 2024, that bright red line, started the year at $5 corn, slowly dropped off to $4 corn. 2025, pretty much flat, $4 corn throughout the entire year. Here's the same graphic on soybeans, and you can see that 23 at the top, price dropped, $2 into 2024. Price dropped another more or less $1 to $2 on average into 2025. So the price of commodities that farmers are selling for has been getting lower and lower the last 2 years. Same data, just extrapolated over a 10-year period. Again, that late 2020, Higher commodity prices led to higher incomes on the farm. And then, unfortunately, starting in 2024, prices came down about as quick as they came up. Farmers have a few different risk management opportunities to help manage the risk and manage where their finances are at. And crop insurance is a big tool. Across the Midwest, about 90 to 95% of corn and soybeans have crop insurance. So again, it's highly utilized. And we can see here, it's the price of corn and soybeans is set nationally. 470 was the spring price on corn. The fall price was 422. These are set nationally. And if there were an indemnity to paid out, it will pay out on the higher of the spring or fall price. So if farmers were to get a crop insurance check this year, it would pay out at 470 corn. Same story on soybeans. It was 1054 in the fall or in the spring. Fall price 1035. It'll pay out on the higher of the two. That's just how crop insurance dictates their price. 1054 was the spring price on soybeans. It varies year to year if the spring or fall price is higher. You can see my graph there the last 5 years just highlighting what that looks like. The next risk management tool that farmers have is the Federal Farm Bill program. So these are the Federal Farm Bill program's ARC, which is a revenue-based county-specific tool. These are for the 2024 growing season, but these payments will be issued this year yet into 2025. They were supposed to be paid out a month ago, but with their governmental shutdown, they're postponed. These payments should be coming in the next few weeks. And we can see Northwest Minnesota did get some decent payments, right? Pennington County, $33 per acre on canola. You know, Lake of the Woods, Marshall County, $34 on canola. Oats, not a whole lot in Northwest Minnesota. Norman County is getting a $24 payment on oats. Sunflower, they're pretty much all in the northwest part of the state. You know, Red Lake, a $48 sunflower payment. Clay County, a $61 sunflower payment. So there are some large farm bill payments coming out here in the next few weeks. You can see wheat. We can see East and West Polk. East Polk, not a whole lot going on, but West Polk irrigated, $40. West Polk non-irrigated, you know, a $6 payment. I'll pick on like Pennington County for wheat got $34.90. So there are some large farm bill payments that will be coming out yet this year. This is the same table here, but for corn, and there's some large corn payments coming out here this year. We can see Polk County not really on the list. Some of the other counties, Norman County is getting a, you know, just under $53 per acre corn ARC payment. So farmers got the option to choose between ARC County, which is a revenue-based tool, and Price or PLC, which is a price-based tool. PLC paid out zero for all the commodities in Minnesota for the crop year 2024. This is the revenue-based tool that's on the screen here right now. And again, there are some counties. Most of these are kind of central and southwest Minnesota or south central Minnesota got higher payments. This is the same table just for soybeans. And again, if we break down east and west, Polk County irrigated got $17 soybean payment. If we look at Norman County, they got a $13 soybean payment. So different pockets of the state got some large payments. This does a quick summary of what the corn ARC payments look like for 2024 growing season. And you can see in Minnesota, that central and south central part of the state, very dark pocket of some higher payments. Probably the highest concentration of payments across the whole country. Same table here with soybeans. And again, the same story where that central, south central Minnesota, kind of the highest concentration of those darker shaded counties for higher payments, right? We had a lot of payments in Minnesota for crop year 2024. So some other price data. I took this morning out of the CHS terminal in Crookston. So this is Crookston prices, and we can see corn currently is 366 for December delivery. For March, it jumps up to 381. So there's a little bit of um, upward trend, a little bit. The carry in the market, is only about 15 cents through March. Soybeans, 10.16 for delivery, 10.15 in February. So it's actually, absolutely no carry into the February window. But, just above $10 currently on soybeans. And then we have spring wheat there right around 5.50. So that's our current prices. So just to keep everybody in the loop. And one other thing I like to highlight, if you do rent land to a beginning farmer, so that's 10 years or less of farming income for the individual, the landowner can get a tax credit from Minnesota. So it's only a Minnesota thing, but you can get 10% of your annual rental income that's rented to a beginning farmer as a tax credit. The form to fill this out through the Department of Agriculture is quite simple. It's really not that complicated of a form, and it maxes out at $7,000 a year. So it's not a small dollar amount. It can be several $1,000s. So if you're interested in this, just go to, a web search engine and search Minnesota Beginning Farmer Tax Credit, and this will come up. You can see on the screen the application due dates are expired. This will be renewed for 2026. So just watch that website for what date that it'll come out. And then I'll highlight some other Finbin data. So again, this is what the Finbin website looks like. It's a very easy to use website, a lot of good information on it. And you can see the summary reports in the green at the top. So when I created those budgets from earlier, it was a crop summary report to help get my kind of background information on what the Northwest Minnesota looks like. You can also create a benchmark report. And this is what a benchmark report can look like. I know there's a lot of numbers here, but we can break it down in these 10% buckets, high to low, on what farms are doing. This is the state of Minnesota as a whole, and you can see yield at the top. Our bottom 10% of yield is 115 bushels per acre. The top 10% of yield, 232 bushels per acre. So there's a wide range of yield in Minnesota. We can break down their seed expense per acre. The seed expense per acre fluctuates from $156 per acre for the most expensive 10%. The cheapest 10% send $85 per acre on seed. So there's a wide variation on seed expenses. And again, this is our just the same table continued on, our net return. So that's net income, right? The bottom 10% of corn growers lost $332 per acre. So that's a pretty substantial loss. The top 10% made $226 per acre. So we have this huge variation, some $500 high to low on profits per acre. So that's the importance of this benchmarking tool. We can see the range of where farmers are across the state of Minnesota. And you can break this down on a county-based breakdown on this benchmark report. So you can say, hey, what's Polk and Norman County? And you can pull the same report and you can get the same breakdown on these 10% brackets for net return for Polk County to say, hey, I made $50 per acre. Is that above average? Is that below average? This tool is helpful to show that if you are above or below average. So this is just some other Finbin data. This is our yield. So in Northwest Minnesota, we're getting about 160 bushel per acre on yield. Soybeans, we're averaging right around 40 bushels per acre. Spring wheat, right around, 60 to 70 bushels per acre. This is sugar beet tons an acre. 2020 and 2022 below average, right around 28 to 30 tons per acre is pretty typical. This is a breakdown on per acre, what are the different expenses. So you can see on corn, the top three most expensive inputs are fertilizer, machinery, and land rent. Right? That's the bright red, the brown, and the green. And this is soybeans. Soybeans, you can see the most expensive input is the green line of land rent, right? Land rent is the most expensive input on soybeans. That brown bar is machinery, and then that next one is seed cost. So it's breaking down what the different expenses are that farmers pay. Spring wheat, the green line is land rent, the red line is fertilizer. Fertilizer got quite a bit more expensive in 2022 and 2023, but fertilizer and land rent, the most expensive inputs. The next one is machinery. Sugar beets, that brown bar at the top is machinery, and then that next one is their seed expense, and then the next one is land rent. So you can see how these different commodities do break down a little bit differently on how much farmers spend per acre. But land rent is one of the most expensive inputs that farmers do spend. Next, we'll switch gears to land values. And what's your land worth? Right? I try to ask people in person, and we always get a wide variation in answers on what is their farmland per acre value for different counties. The University of Minnesota does collect this land sales data. You can see the website on the screen there is where you can find it, and it's broken down per township on that website. So this is Northwest Minnesota specifically, and you can see that Polk County had quite a few land sales, 43 land sales in 2024. And these are farmland specific, and they have to be a minimum of 20 acres. So we try to weed out if it's, a 5-acre parcel. We try to get those out of the data set. And we can see Polk County again, 43 land sales, averaging $5,100 per acre. The average in 2023 was $4,900 per acre. So it increased about $200 per acre from 23 into 2024. We can pick out Norman County. There were 33 land sales. The average sale price there is $7,000 per acre. The minimum $900 per acre, and the maximum there just under $11,000 per acre. The average sale price in Norman County in 2023 was just under $5,300 per acre. So from 23 to 24, Norman County increased on average about $1,800 per acre. So a very strong increase in Norman County specifically. You can see other counties are on the table here. It's pretty interesting. Like you pick on Clay County from $1,600 to $10,000 per acre. We have Clearwater County, $900 per acre, all the way up to $7,300 per acre. So there can be some wide variation in price points on land. I do want to highlight the Minnesota Department of Revenue does collect this. It's the same data that's in the other data set that the University of Minnesota collects. This data set is updated approximately monthly. So if you want to get, hey, what are 2025 land sales? This website should have those. The University of Minnesota website is updated once a year in the springtime for the previous year's transactions. And I also get some questions about what's the productivity of my land, right? What's the crop productivity index? So it's on a scale of 0 to 100 on productivity in the soil. So 100 means you have fantastic soil. 0 means you're not farming it. It's not farmable. Most farm fields are above 50 on the CPI index, but the University of Minnesota does have a map, so you can highlight, your specific parcel and what its CPI index is. I have had landowners tell me they use this to help dictate what they should pay for or get paid for their land rental information, right? If they are above average for the county, below average for the county with the CPI index. So here's a map of it. In the handout, I have a bunch of these resources listed, and this is one of them. So you can go to this website and find your individual parcel. So this is USDA average nationwide real estate farm values. The orange line is inflation adjusted. The blue line is just nominal value. So you can see that orange line back in 1950, farmland was selling for 750 bucks. Now it's selling for, 4,350 bucks. So we have a large increase in farmland values, right? They've appreciated the last 70 years. This is a breakdown of per state, what's the average cropland value. And I think that's $7,000 for Minnesota. I don't think that means a whole lot. But in Minnesota, our farmland, specific cropland, has increased 7% according to the USDA from 2024 into 2025. So that's above the national average, and it's about the highest in the entire Midwest. So I don't really know why Minnesota was a little bit of an outlier, but our increase in the rate of farmland values is a very strong increase. This is that same data just broken down per year. And you can see Minnesota in 2021 was worth $5,030 per acre. Into 2025, it's now $7,000 per acre. So just in this 5-year period, we've jumped about 40% in terms of farm value. So these strong increases in farmland values the last few years. And I do want to highlight for everybody in the call here that when we're talking about our farmland agreement here, that we're using our actual historical, realistic production history. So what can our farm fields actually produce in this county? So this is the USDA average county yields for corn and soybeans. So we have East and West Polk broken down. Granted, it's the same exact number for both of them, so they really don't break it down, I guess. But regardless, Polk County, the 5-year average, just under 150 bushels per acre on corn. So I hear all the time from people where they always use these nice, even, round numbers. Oh, I get 180 bushel corn, or I get 200 bushel corn. Well, is that realistic, right? This 200 bushel corn, is that for the farm average? Is that for one individual field or one parcel of one field? What is our actual production on these farm fields? You can see in Polk County on soybeans, the 5-year average yield is 37 bushels per acre. So again, using this 45, 50 bushels per acre is above average for this part of the state. So I just want to highlight that. In the handout, I have every county in the state broken down for what is their actual county yields. Next here, I have some worksheets that are available to our website. The first one is from the landowner's point of view, and it's pretty simple. So the farm size, so how many acres? So in this example, we have 156. I do want to highlight using acres that we are renting out, not owned acres. If you own 180 acres, but only 156 are tillable, use the 156 number. And then the value per acre. What is that value per acre? Again, we walked through some of those land sales, and there's a lot of movement in just, within 1 year in one county in terms of land sales. So finding a realistic number for your farm is a little bit of a challenge. I would recommend your county assessed value is a pretty good starting point. Just in the last week or two, counties should have mailed out to all landowners what their actual real estate values and their appraisal values that the county thinks is the market value. That's a good starting point for what your farm is worth. So back to this worksheet, the next row, simply multiply the two together. Number of acres times price, you get the total farm value. The next line item there, desired rate of return. Typically in the Midwest, farmland gets a 2 to 2.5% rate of return. That's historically where we've been in the Midwest, where if you have $5,000 per acre value cropland, you're going to get $100 to $125 per acre land rent, right? That's that 2 to 2.5%. That's pretty accurate over the last, 10 years in the Midwest. Also, real estate taxes, right? Real estate taxes are going to vary depending on your school district, your township, and in the county. I would argue, or I would guess in Northwest Minnesota, they're $20 to $30 per acre. It's pretty realistic to where they're going to be at. You might have some liability insurance on the farm. So maybe you have some umbrella policy on your farmland. Every once in a while, you might have some other cash costs like fixing a fence, fixing a gate, putting in a new culvert, things like that that don't happen every year. And then you just sum up all those, your total desired return, and then you divide by how many acres. This first example, 213. So that's a little bit higher than most fields in Northwest Minnesota. This next example here, you follow the math there. $115 per acre land rent is the desired rate of return on that value of $3,500. So that's pretty close to what we would be seeing in Northwest Minnesota. But walk through this worksheet. I think it's a good starting point for landowners to come in and a good starting point for them to think about what they want for land rent. The next worksheet here is for the farmer's point of view. So this one highlights how much farmers can afford to spend on land rent. So put in the number of acres farmed. In this example, 100 acres corn and soybeans. Next, we put down expected yield and expected price. Next, we break down all of our expenses. So what is the farm spending on seed, fertilizer, repairs, marketing, operating interest? What are all these different expenses on a per acre basis? And then what about our overhead expenses? What about insurance, interest, depreciation? And then the operator return, right? Farmers are farming to, support the family and make a living. Typically, farmers see about a $50 per acre return for their time and effort of farming. And then at the bottom of the worksheet, you sum up your total expenses, look at your total income, and this worksheet will break down how much is available to cover land rent. So in this example, we have $106 the farmer can spend on land rent. If they spend more than that, they're taking away from their profits. If they spend less than that, they are adding to their profits. This website, fairrent.umn.edu, is that same decision tool, just an online platform where you don't have to edit that information every single year. And in this website, you can have multiple examples or multiple fields in there at one time, so you don't have to change it all that often. But it's a good starting point for the farmer to review where they're at. The next worksheet we have here is the acceptable price. We can call it the cost of production or break-even point. They all mean the same thing. Very similar to that previous worksheet. How many acres? We have 500 corn, 500 soybeans. What is your expected yield and expected price? What are your direct expenses, right? What is the farm spending on seed, fertilizer, chemicals? What's your machinery expense? How much are we spending on land rent? So putting all these expenses together. Same with those overhead expenses. What are we spending on utilities and insurance and interest and depreciation on the farm? Adding together all of our expenses. And then looking at what's our family living cost, right? We have this family living expense in this example of $90,000. 60% of that's coming from the farm, the other 40% some off-farm income. So the farm needs to make $54,000 to support the family. So again, we want to highlight and incorporate this family living expense because that's the whole point of farming is to support the family. And then at the bottom of the worksheet, you put down your total expenses, look at your total income there, and calculate on a per bushel basis what is your acceptable price. So in this example, $5 corn and $13 soybeans. So again, hopefully Farms can find out what their cost of production is just to highlight where they're at, right? We want to make sure that when farmers sell, they're selling at a profitable number. This crop cost at umn.edu website is again that same worksheet, just on an online version. So it's again a very good starting point, very good tool for farmers to use and help determine what their cost of production is. Flexible lease agreements. So most often in the land rental world, the farmer pays the landowner a predetermined dollar per acre basis on land rent. So I'll just use $100 per acre as an example. And it's common that we split the payment 50% spring, 50% fall. So roughly April 1, the farmer pays the landowner $50. And then roughly November 1, the farmer pays the landowner the remaining $50, right? That's a pretty common approach. The flexible lease agreement will change, hence the term flexible. That final dollar amount per acre is flexible. So if the farmer had above average price or yield, land rent might increase. Or if we had below average price or yield, land rent may decrease. So instead of that $50 fall payment, the landowner might only get $40 per acre in the fall if yields were below average. Or if yields were above average, maybe they would get $60 per acre, so they get a $10 bonus. So there's different ways to do this. You can do this based on gross revenue. You can do base rent plus a bonus. You can do flexible rent on yield or price. There's different ways to do it. I've talked with a lot of farmers and landowners. Most like the idea of it, but the final calculation on what price point to use, like how to determine price received or price to calculate this, can get complicated. I've had landowners and farmers say, hey, we've tried this. In the long run, simply just doing the straight cash rental agreement is almost easier in some people's opinion. It's a good tool. I have some slides here on it. If you don't want to mess with the extra calculation, don't bother, but it can be a good tool. Flexible on percent of gross revenue historically. On corn, 29% of gross revenue goes to land rent, and 39% of gross revenue on soybeans goes to land rent. So at 350 corn, it's kind of where we're at today, at 150 bushel per acre, that is $152 per acre land rent. On $9 soybeans at 39% at 40 bushel, that's $140 per acre land rental payment. So it's one way to calculate land rental rates on this gross revenue item here. We have a specific question on organic farming. I don't have a whole lot of data specifically on organic farming. I think with an organic farm, you just need to have the same communication process on what's the farmer's expected rate of return on profits and things like that. I haven't dealt a whole lot with organic. Typically, if we want to do an organic rental agreement, the farmer probably is going to want a longer term lease just to make sure that they're staying organic, or if maybe the landowner converted that soil to organic, it might change the dollar amounts. I don't have a whole lot of experience talking about land rental specific to organic. I can try to get more data on that, but I don't have much to add at this point. One other thing we like to highlight, a landowner is able to take a first lien position in growing crops on rented ground. So you as a landowner, you can go file a UCC1 financing statement. That's just the form that you use to actually file this, and it will tell you what to file this statement. You are legally obligated to get paid by the farmer. So I've had landowners tell me every single year they file this UCC1 financing statement, and then when that farmer goes to sell their crops, it'll show up in the system that they owe landowner Heather X amount of dollars. So that's how it works. Again, I've had landowners tell me they file this every year and it works well. It's for peace of mind. There is a small fee with this. It's like $20 or $30, so it's pretty minimal to file it. Um, if you ever take out a loan for a car or for a house or for pretty much anything, the bank will take a lien out on something to secure the bank on their property or for their risk management. Um, so they're very common to file these liens. I would make one argument from a landowner's point of view. If you're working with the farmer and you are really struggling to get paid the last year or two, it may be time to get another farmer to come in and pay you in a more timely fashion. So if you are unhappy in the relationship with the farmer or landowner, maybe it's time to move on and find someone else. I do recommend putting a lease into writing. Just for legal and clarity reasons, for both the landowner and the farmer, understand the details. All agreements should be outlined and can be reviewed. It's also a guide for heirs. I've had a lot of conversations with recent widows or for children and their parents own the farmland and they inherited it. And they're like, I have no idea what's going on. I don't know what an appropriate land rental rate is. I have no idea what my dad charged the last 10, 20 years without communicating with them and without having a lease in writing, it's really tough for that, new family member to understand what's going on. So I think writing this down is just too important not to do. It should be signed and dated by both parties. So what to include? Name and address of the landowner and the farmer, legal description of the land, beginning and end date of the lease, and then the rent details. What's the rent amount, the dollar amount? What are the due dates? Is it April 1 and November 1? Is it 100% May 1, right? What are the due dates? What's the payment type? Cash, check, cow, pig, right? They want half a cow. All types of different things can be negotiated. And then late payment considerations. What happens if the farmer pays late? Is there a fee? Is there a penalty fee? Does it terminate the lease and now someone else has the right to come in and farm it? Having this conversation up front is helpful. And then termination details. What's the end date? Right? How long is this lease? Is it 1 year, 2 year, 10 years? Is there a notice requirement that the landowner has to tell the farmer by September 1st if that farmer gets it the next year? What about reimbursement considerations for fall applied fertilizer or tillage, right? Maybe the farmer did tillage and fertilizer this fall with the anticipation of farming it in the springtime. But now you as a landlord say, hey, now December 1, I'm going to get another farmer to come in, have a good day. Well, that previous farmer might want to get paid for that fertilizer. Amendments and disputes. What happens if you want to change something down the road? And what about insurance? Typically, the landowner has their own landowner's insurance. The farmer has their crop insurance. Some of these aren't complicated, but we may want to discuss these. Landowners' rights. I think the big one here is hunting rights and just who has the ability to enter the property. And if the landowner wants to hunt that parcel of ground, in the fall, and they don't want the farmer out there for that 2 week window, the landowner needs to tell the farmer before that, 2 week hunting season, right? Telling them up front, say, hey, you can farm this, but please don't combine, the second weekend in November when I'm trying to shoot a deer. Federal Farm Bill programs, management participation. Does the landowner want to be considered a farmer for tax reasons? Certain people, for tax reasons, it's beneficial. Is there any intent for partnership? Any preferred farming practices, right? Is there any no-till or organic or minimizing spray chemicals we're using, right? Are some of these things can be sought after by the landowner for soil health reasons? You need to talk with the farmer up front. If you want your farm to be no-till, well, that farmer needs to buy a new planter. If they don't have that planter, That might be an expensive input for them, and they might not want to do a no-till operation. So can the farmer improve the property? So can the farmer put in tiling or irrigation? It's not uncommon for farmers to pay for tiling on rented ground. If they do that, they're going to want a long-term lease to make up for their expenses that they paid in. If the landowner's going to pay to tile of ground, they probably want a little higher land rent to compensate them for their expense as well. And then a property map highlighting proper approaches and property lines are important. Aglius101.org has some good lease examples. So if you have, if you are wondering where to get started, this aglius101.org has some good sample leases. So it's a good website to check out. Also, Iowa State. So the website on the screen here, Iowa State does have some pretty decent land rent lease examples that I think are easily editable to your individual operation. So kind of wrapping up here, we only got about 10 minutes left on this call here. Steps in negotiation. Start with solid research, right? What is appropriate county average land rent? Again, my workshop here today and the handout that I've emailed to everyone has all of the solid research, I think, for get you guys started. Clarify your goals. I would make the argument that if you want long-term best soil health and if you want always top dollar for land rent, those goals can be conflicting. So I just kind of want to highlight that, if you want your one farmer to come in and farm it year over year who has doing a good job of maintaining soil health and appropriate fertilization levels, that's important as well as, getting your dollars per rate of return. So just think of that. There's a lot that goes into this land rental negotiation process. And then communicate clearly. Again, if you want to hunt that parcel of ground, tell the farmer, hey, please don't go out here XYZ dates. Make offers thoughtfully, showcase value, be flexible, right? This is kind of a compromise. We're kind of trying to come to, a middle ground. The landowner wants high dollar amount for land rent for their income. Farmers want more or less the minimal possible to limit their expenses. So just kind of highlight that. And then put it in writing. I do think it's important to put this down in a writing. And then review the lease. Legal if desired. If you want a lawyer to look at this lease, I don't think it's mandatory, but it can be a good option just to have another set of eyes look over it. And then foster a strong relationship. Again, most farmers want to rent this parcel of ground year over year. They don't want this to be a one-term commitment. They want to rent this over a long time or over a long period of time. So they want this relationship to last. So they're willing to work with you. And again, most landowners, they don't want to be finding a new farmer every single fall for next spring. They would rather just work with a farmer who's doing a good job maintaining the soil and renting that every year, year over year. And then review and adapt. From the farmer's point of view here, we want to make sure that their costs are getting covered. And then what's their land rent versus rental rates? Most farmers are renting more than one parcel. What's the relationship between the different parcels that they're renting and price points? And then what's the relationship between prices and productivity of the field? Financial position of the farm. Some farmers made a lot of money, especially in 2021 and 2022. Maybe they are saying, you know what, I can pay whatever I want for land rent. We have no issues. Not every farmer can say that. So just keep that in mind as well. The last year and then into this next year is looking a little bit tougher on the farm financially. And then there's other income generating possibilities. There's other options for farmers to consider as well. From the landowner's point of view, we want to make sure that their costs are getting covered. A lot of landowners use this land rental income as, retirement income of sorts. We want to make sure that their financial needs are being met and that they are being treated fairly. I get phone calls every single year saying, hey, I got Farmer Bob trying to rent this field and he's offering me $50 per acre. Is that a fair price? And the county average is $130. No, that's not probably a very fair price. What's the strength of that tenant relationship? Have you been renting to the same farm family for 20 years and it's always been going well, pay a fair price and always pay on time? That's worth a lot versus, this is the first year that you're renting to this person and you just don't quite know what to think of them. Quality of their economic care, is that farmer doing a good job treating your farmland, right? Are the soil tests coming back positively from your field, right? Are they treating it appropriately, fertilizing it appropriately, getting, good yields? Or are they more or less mining the soil for fertilizer and not doing a very good job maintaining soil health, right? You as a landowner, you want the soil health to be maintained at a high level so that your value in the farmland does not depreciate or does not decrease. And then leasing options, right? We can change more than just the dollar amount on the lease, long term versus short term. Most leases are relatively short, where they're 1, 2, 3 years long. Maybe a long-term lease is agreeable to both sides. We can add some clauses to the agreement. Maybe we want to plow snow for the landowner in the wintertime, or mow the ditches in the summertime, or fix fence. There's different things that we can incorporate here as well. Flexible leases can be an option, but it's again highlighting what this can look like. Negotiation skills are important. Again, win-win is the ideal outcome. We want both the farmer and the landowner to be happy at the end of the day, where otherwise it's not going to be a very long-term agreement. And then writing it down. I think writing it down is just too easy not to do. Prepare, engage, and review. I do want to highlight utilizing objective criteria. And what I mean by that is realistic data, right? Using this USDA statistics, right? I've walked through a bunch of those already. That FinBin database is a fantastic resource that we have. Don't be relying on this coffee shop talk where numbers get exaggerated or blown out of proportion. Maybe a farmer said, hey, I got 200 bushel corn. He didn't mean, the whole farm average, but for one field he did. We want to make sure that we're clarifying, again, farm average versus individual fields can have a high variation. So using realistic data is very important to this land rental negotiation process because typically the higher the yield, the higher the land rent. So using realistic yields is just important to get a realistic land rental value. And then a list of resources. So the University of Minnesota website, the FinBin database, the USDA NASS database, Farmland sales, both the university one and then the state one, the crop productivity index map, cost of production, the fair rent program, and those two separate lease examples are all helpful resources for everybody to get started in this land rent negotiation process. Thank you to everyone joining today. You can see my contact information is on the screen here if everyone wants to reach out to me with future questions.